There's been a lot of talk in recent months and years about the increasing price of iPhones, but how much of that is true and how much of that is just exaggeration? Let's find out. So a video like this is bound to get a lot of dislikes. In fact, I'm sure a lot of people have already done that and then left before I've even said anything, but for those of you who stuck around, I'd like to start with a big disclaimer. My goal with this video is not to debunk or give an explanation as to why iPhones are getting more expensive. I just want to give you a clearer picture looking at more accurate data than what I have seen out there. There are like a million different ways to look at this issue, so today I'm going to show you one that I think gives a pretty clear picture, but of course there are other ways that you can examine this issue, so take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. Okay, so let's jump right in. Pretty much since the iPhone XS Max came out with the ludicrous $1,100 starting price, there have been a lot of articles and videos about people going, whoa, what is going on right now? Why are iPhones so expensive nowadays? I remember they used to be like $200 and now you're shelling out $1,500 for a XS Max. This is getting bananas. In fact, there's a video that I think sums up this argument pretty well. It was posted a couple of days ago by CNBC. It's called, "Why is Apple So Expensive?" And despite what you may think from the title, this is mainly about iPhones. They mainly discuss evidence as it relates to the increasing price of iPhones, as the Max really, they're expensive, but they haven't gotten more expensive that recently. This mainly surrounds iPhones. And in fact, the description pretty much sums up what a lot of people have to say on this issue. Apple products have never been cheap, but the cost of many of its gadgets has increased dramatically over time. So the crux of the argument that they have in this CNBC video and in countless of articles, posts, and videos across the web is if you look at the price of iPhones over time, there's a huge increase starting in about 2015 and the prices just go crazy. And the way that this CNBC video explains that is by looking at the sales volume of iPhones over time. They show a graph that has the sales volume increasing, and then around 2015 it starts to level out. And essentially when the sales volume was increasing, there was no need to increase the prices because Apple was selling more of them every year as time went along, but that once in about 2015 the sales started to level out, Apple had to increase the prices to cover and keep those profits going. So the main thing that I want to talk about is the increase in price. Because while that argument makes sense if you look at the graphs that CNBC has provided, if you actually examine the initial graph that shows the increase of price in iPhones over time, there are a lot of glaring misconceptions and misinformation that graph contains. Okay, so let's start by examining the CNBC graph. There are a couple of issues that I have with the way that this graph is laid out. To explain what they're trying to say here, the blue bar reflects the base price of the iPhone in question, and the yellow bar represents the most expensive storage configuration. This isn't labeled, but that's what I imagine they're going for here. Now, the bigger issue that I have with this graph is it doesn't effectively deal with the changes the iPhone line went through over time. It ignores some iPhones like the 5C and the XR, but it includes the iPhone 8 and iPhone SE, even though those weren't flagship models. It also leaves out all the Plus and Max models. It's just not very clear looking at this graph what iPhone prices we are comparing. To get a better picture, we need to first decide what iPhones we want to compare. So I'm going to take the liberty of distilling down to just flagship iPhones, no Plus models, no less expensive models, just the main deal. And I'm going to treat the 10 and the XS as flagship models, so we're going to set aside the iPhone 8 and the iPhone XR for these purposes. Okay, so this is what the graph looks like when you distill it down to just the flagship iPhones. You can see we go 4, 4S, 5, 5S, 6, 6S, 7, 10, XS. We kind of have a more comparable list of iPhones. However, we're not out of the woods yet because this graph is still fundamentally misleading and incorrect. See, the main issue is Apple used to display iPhone prices with a 2-year contract. This was essentially a subsidized way to buy an iPhone where you would pay $200 up front and you would be locked into a 2-year contract, and over that period of 2 years, you would essentially pay down the remainder of the iPhone in addition to having your data plan. These subsidized prices do not reflect the true cost of the iPhone, so the fact that they've been included on this graph as a comparison is misleading. Starting in 2015, Apple stopped displaying subsidized prices as those kind of went out of style, and they started displaying just the full unlocked price of any new iPhone. And that's why you see this massive jump in 2015 from $200 to $650. So the next correction that we're going to do is we're going to put the true cost of the unlocked iPhones, not the subsidized iPhones. So this is what the graph looks like with all of the prices adjusted to be comparable. The unlocked prices of an iPhone. The blue is the base price, the green is the most expensive configuration, and you can see that we're starting to look a lot more flat. Basically from the iPhone 4 to the iPhone 7, the price, at least the base price, doesn't change at all. However, we are still missing one key aspect. The first iPhone came out in 2007, and these prices don't account for inflation. So we need to go through and adjust all of these to use 2019 dollars to see the true prices directly comparable. Okay, so this is what the graph looks like with everything adjusted into current 2019 dollars. Now, because there was that period from about 2010 to 2016 where the iPhone stayed at $650, the prices actually look like they decrease a little bit as we get more recent and inflation is less. And then the prices go back up again starting in 2017 when the iPhone X came out. Now don't get me wrong, if you look at this graph, it's very clear that there is an increase in iPhone prices. However, it's a lot less dramatic than the CNBC video would have you believe. And I'm still not quite satisfied with how this graph looks because to give a true picture of what we're working with here, we really need to put every single iPhone on the graph. So for the sake of complete clarity, I want to look at this graph with every single new iPhone model included at launch price adjusted for inflation. This will give us the best idea of how iPhone pricing has actually changed over time. So here's what the graph looks like with every single model of iPhone included. It's definitely a lot more messy than the CNBC graph, and it doesn't have as clear an increase over time. However, you can still see that there is definitely an increase in price as we go along. There are a couple of outliers like the iPhone XS Max, which is just way more expensive than everything else, and there is also the iPhone SE, which is really low in comparison to most of its siblings. Now, just to simplify this graph, because it's definitely a little messy, I'm going to take out the green bars and just show you what the graph looks like if you look at the base price of the iPhones as we go along. Okay, so this is what the graph looks like if we isolate everything to the base price and we leave out all of the top storage configuration models. Now, very clearly you can see here that the iPhone X, iPhone XS, and XS Max are by far and away the most expensive. Pretty much everything else tops out at around $825. You can see the iPhone 8 Plus just barely touches that line, but the iPhone X series goes way over that. So as you can see from this data, yes, the iPhone has been getting more expensive, but it's very important that when we talk about this issue, we use correct information, adjusting for inflation, using the correct price that is directly comparable of unlocked iPhones. These are very important so that we don't mislead people. If you look at this graph of everything base price for every iPhone adjusted for inflation, it looks a lot different and a lot less dramatic than the graph that CNBC showed us. This is very important because regardless of what you think of the issue, you should be looking at correct information. So being able to look at this information and draw a conclusion based on actual pricing over time is pretty important. So do with this information what you will. Whether this changes your mind over thinking, ooh, maybe the iPhone X isn't as expensive as I thought it was compared to other iPhones, or if you want to say, excuse you, the iPhone XS Max is still way too expensive, that's fine. I don't have an opinion as to what is going on here. I just wanted to give you guys the correct information so you can make an informed decision. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As usual, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.